So all that information is available in our commercial paper program.
And who got the money?
Hundreds and hundreds of banks. Any bank or that has access to the U.S. Federal Reserve's discount.
Can you tell us who they are?
No.
So who got the money?
To financial institutions in Europe and other countries.
Which ones?
I don't know.
Kashgari, do you have any response?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Just to Mr. Cummings, I don't know how to work any harder than we're already working. And I take your feedback very seriously. That's why we're working as hard as we are, and we're just going to keep doing and trying to accomplish and meet your expectations.
Thank you very much.
If I may take the prerogative as chair to say, I don't think anyone questions, Mr. Kashgari, that you're working hard. Our question is who you're working for.
Goldman Sachs was the largest domestic recipient of funds in this AIG counterparty arrangement. Let me ask you, now as Treasury Secretary, your Chief of Staff is the gatekeeper for access to you. Could you please provide his name?
His name is Mark Patterson.
Thank you. And for whom did he work before you selected him as your Chief of Staff?
He worked for the President's transition team.
No, before that. Which Wall Street firm did he work for?
Before that, again, this is a matter of public record, and you know the answer to this question. He worked for Goldman Sachs. But
thank you very much. Now, you answered my question, Mr. Secretary. Now, let me say this. The AIG transaction, you have answered the question. You've answered the question. Thank you.
Let me make clear, this entire proposal is about benefiting the American people, because today's fragile financial system puts their economic well-being at risk.
Hey Henry Paulson, what's it like in New York City? Heard that AIG was coming down, but now they're sitting pretty thanks to you. Man, I could use a bailout too, I swear it's true.
It's important to clearly understand the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It is about as Federal Express. It makes its own policies and is under virtually no regulation by the U.S. government. It is a private bank that loans all the currency at interest to the government, completely consistent with the fraudulent central banking model that the country sought to escape from when it declared independence in the American Revolutionary War. The public was told that the Federal Reserve System was an economic stabilizer, and inflation and economic crises were a thing of the past. Well, as history has shown, nothing is further from the truth. The fact is, the international bankers now had a streamlined machine to expand their personal ambitions.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
For example, from 1914 to 1919, the Fed increased the money supply by nearly 100%. Resulting in extensive loans to small banks and the public. Then, in 1920, the Fed called in mass percentages of the outstanding money supply, thus resulting in the supporting banks having to call in huge numbers of loans, and, just like 1907, bank runs, bankruptcy, and collapse occurred. Over 5,400 competitive banks outside of the Federal Reserve System collapsed, further consolidating the monopoly of the small group of international bankers. Privy to this crime, Congressman Lindbergh stepped up and said in 1921, "Under the Federal Reserve Act, panics are scientifically created. The present panic is the first scientifically created one, worked out as we figure a mathematical equation." However, the panic of 1920 was just a warm-up. From 1921 to 1929, the Fed again increased the money supply, resulting once again in extensive loans to the public and banks. There was also a fairly new type of loan called a margin loan in the stock market. Very simply, the margin loan allowed an investor to put down only 10% of a stock's price, with the other 90% being loaned through the broker. In other words, a person could own $1,000 worth of stock with only $100 down. This method was very popular in the roaring 1920s, as everyone seemed to be making money in the market. However, there was a catch to this loan. It could be called in at any time and had to be paid within 24 hours. This is termed a margin call, and the typical result of a margin call is the selling of the stock purchased with the loan. So, a few months before October in 1929, J.D. Rockefeller, Bernard Baruch, and other insiders quietly exited the market. And on October 24, 1929, the New York financiers who furnished the margin loans started calling them in masse. This sparked an instantaneous, massive sell-off in the market, for everyone had to cover the margin loans. It then triggered mass bank runs for the same reason, in turn collapsing over 16,000 banks, enabling the conspiring international bankers to not only buy up rival banks at a discount, but to also buy up whole corporations at pennies on the dollar. It was the greatest robbery in American history. But that didn't stop there. Rather than expanding the money supply in order to recover from this economic collapse, the Fed actually contracted it, fueling one of the largest depressions in history. Once again outraged, Congressman Louis McFadden, a longtime opponent of the banking cartels, began bringing impeachment proceedings against the Federal Reserve Board, saying of the crash and depression, it was a carefully contrived occurrence. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all. Not surprisingly, and after 2 previous assassination attempts, McFadden was poisoned at a banquet before he could push for the impeachment. Now, having reduced the society to squalor, the Federal Reserve bankers decided that the gold standard should be removed. In order to do this, they needed to acquire the remaining gold in the system. So, under the pretense of helping to end the Depression, came the 1933 gold seizure. Under the threat of imprisonment for 10 years, everyone in America was required to turn in all gold bullion to the Treasury, essentially robbing the public of what little wealth they had left. And at the end of 1933, the gold standard was abolished. If you look at a dollar bill from before 1933, it says it is redeemable in gold. You look at a dollar bill today, it says it is legal tender, which means it is backed by absolutely nothing. It is worthless paper. The only thing that gives our money value is how much of it is in circulation.
Since the creation of the Federal Reserve back in 1913, the value of the dollar has gone down by 92%. In the 125 years before the Fed started printing money, the value of the dollar went up by 13%. Both the Bush administration and now the Obama administration have added trillions to the national debt, leaving our nation either already or on the brink of bankruptcy. One thing is for sure. You can't spend your way out of debt.
I would imagine you are still having some discussions with the fund managers who are managing the fund on a daily basis. And would you advise them to be long the dollar here at this point, given the way you just described?
Well, look, it's a very complicated thing. And of course, I know exactly what the dollar is going to do, but I'm not at liberty.
You're not going to tell me.
But as this shows, there clearly is a group of people out there that feels very passionately about this. The third question on the list with 712 digs was from Moto Bike Man, who said, what is your position on Ron Paul's House Resolution 1207, which, as I understand it, calls for a comprehensive audit of the Fed? Why does this persist if, as you say, the Fed is already fully audited?
Well, the Fed is dramatically more transparent than it was. Is subject to very comprehensive oversight and audits. But there are certain things about what the Fed does that, again, you need to make sure that you preserve as independent political influence. And that line is in a line that we don't want to cross. And I think that even the sponsor of that bill recognizes how important it is to us to have the Fed independent of politics. And I'm sure many of the people concerned about the Fed's role in the system will understand that it would be problematic for the country if you let politicians come in and shape conduct of monetary policy in the country.
I consider the Federal Reserve Act and the creation of the Federal Reserve as being unconstitutional. It gave the government then the power to create legal tender out of thin air, that is, to create paper money. And although they didn't do that overnight, between 1913 and 1971, that is exactly what happened. But the notion of a central bank does not fit into the Constitution. The Congress has the authority to coin money, and only gold and silver should be legal tender. And this is an absolute contradiction with the Constitution to have a Federal Reserve system and a central bank. not a lot of American people understand it, and I would add that probably not too many people here in the Congress understand it either. I think they see it as a convenience. I think a lot of other people see it as a convenience because they think they're protected by the type of system that we have. But a fiat monetary system or a paper money system is merely a system where the government has this power and authority to dictate and insist that a piece of paper is legal tender. And even members of the banking committee have come up to me and they said, "You mean our dollar isn't backed by gold anymore?" Not realizing that the Federal Reserve really accommodates big government bureaucrats and politicians.